the whisper that still echoes beneath the stone. I stand here now, at the edge of the forgotten clearing, beneath a moon so thin it could be a silver blade held to the throat of night. Before me rises what remains of the temple's entrance, the sea, scarred by centuries of rain, lichen, and silent dread. But tonight I had to see it with my own eyes, to touch the stone where 1,000 hearts beat their last, where a god without eyes dreamed of the final darkness. Snow drifts down, settling upon the rune-carved surface, filling each groove with pale shadow. The runes burn cold against my palm, and for an instant I imagine I feel something stir beneath, like a great beast shifting in restless sleep. I close my eyes, listening past the sighing wind and cracking ice, past the tremble of branches and distant owl cries. They say no one comes here anymore, that wolves skirt this place in silence, and the birch trees lean away as if fearing what still sleeps below. Drink my darkness, and you shall see all things that tremble in the blind spaces behind creation. I place my gloved hand upon the frozen granite, and then I hear it, a whisper, faint as moth wings brushing parchment. A voice not spoken into the ear, but curled directly into the mind, ancient, cracked, and dripping with hunger. But the whisper continues, curling into every shadow of my thoughts. 1,000 hearts, 1,000 years. The seals crack, stone decays, and silence will end. I gasp, stumbling back from the door. My breath comes in ragged plumes, clouding the moonlight with fear. For a moment, the snow swirls into a shape, tall, faceless, mouth gaping wide in a scream that swallows all sound. I blink, and it is gone, leaving only moonlight and falling snow. Eat them and become me. Feed me, and I shall open your mind like an egg. The wind rises, rattling dead birch branches like bone chimes. I turn away, heart thundering, steps crunching through frozen drifts. Behind me, the sea looms silent, its runes glowing faintly with reflected moonlight or something far older. I do not look back again. But even now, as I walk away through the skeletal birch forest, the whisper coils through my mind like a worm through rot. 1,000 years almost past. I will rise, and you will feed me first. They say that on the longest night of the dying year, when the moon bleeds rust over the bare, black branches, you can still hear the prayers that once rose from this forest clearing. Prayers whispered in a language older than kings, older than the Bible, older even than the first name ever carved upon stone. I stand here now upon frozen earth where nothing grows, staring at the broken steps that lead up to the shattered altar. The air tastes of iron and damp ash. Snow falls softly through the silent birch trees, settling upon crumbling runes that no scholar has yet deciphered. It runs from the stone table down a groove to the earth, where it disappears into a fissure black as a blind man's dream. Once, blood flowed here, bright arterial blood, the blood of youth and terror. It poured down these runes like crimson rain, seeping into the dark soil to awaken something sleeping beneath. The story of a cult that believed 1,000 virgins would buy them a god. For before this night ends, you too will hear its whisper calling from below. The story of the eyeless one who opened its mouth to drink a kingdom's worth of dreams. The story of a darkness that did not die when the stones fell silent. A darkness that waits still, patient as bone, hungry as time. But I know what they say. My torch flickers, casting long shadows across the ruined temple's moss-choked walls. Not words, not song, but a sound like wet lips parting to draw breath. The sound of something that remembers the warmth of blood and the taste of a heart still beating. Shapes dance and melt, hooded priests raising obsidian knives, pale naked bodies tied to stone, the red spray of life severed in an instant. They speak of blood and hearts, of 1,000 voices screaming as their final breath fogged the cold night air. They speak of a cult so hidden and so patient that it took 3 generations to gather its sacrifices, to feed the darkness that slept beneath this stone. And they speak of what came when the 1,000th throat was slit, of eyes that never opened, and a mouth that swallowed every prayer and every scream into a silence deeper than death. I kneel upon the broken flagstones, brushing away snow to reveal a channel carved into the altar's surface. The wind shifts, carrying with it the faint scent of old decay, as if something rotting far below has exhaled through a cracked earth to greet the night. I close my eyes and listen. Beneath the whisper of falling snow, beneath the creak of bare branches, I hear it, a faint echo rising from the fissure. Tonight, I have come to tell you their story. Sit with me now. Let the snow fall upon your shoulders and the chill sink into your marrow. Listen carefully. 1,000 hearts for 1,000 years, and now it is your turn. Long before the 1,000 sacrifices, before the blood ran down stone and into the earth's silent mouth, there was a man named Azelian. No records remain of his birth, only fragments of forbidden chronicles hinting that he was once a scholar in Constantinople. When the great city burned with fading gold and plague-black rot alike, he arrived in Europe as a wanderer cloaked in rags, bearing a single treasure, a scroll wrapped in cured human skin, sealed with black wax. Some said it was written in cuneiform, older than Babylon. Others whispered it was inked in the blood of a demon prince slain by Cimmerian kings. What is known is that wherever Azelian went, death flowered like mold in damp shadow. At first, he posed as a physician, promising remedies for fevers the priests could not cure. But his treatments came at a price: a lock of hair, a tooth, a drop of blood willingly given. To each he promised the same: I will show you the secret face of God. But first, you must feed his shadow. And there, by dim torchlight, Azelian unrolled his skin-bound scroll, its surface crawling with glyphs that seemed to shift under the eye. A god without eyes, without pity, with only hunger vast enough to swallow every prayer and leave behind only silence. A god who demanded 1,000 pure hearts to build his flesh upon the earth once more. He read aloud words that cracked the air with a smell like rancid milk and blood-wet copper. Villagers desperate to live offered him all. In secret, he mixed these fragments of life with black resins. Soldiers came to seize him. But when they burst into his hut at dawn, they found only a circle of black ash upon the packed earth floor, and the scent of burnt myrrh lingering in the air, and foul-smelling oils chanting in his ruined tongue to spirits no church dared name. And then Azelian returned. Those who drank his concoctions often lived, but they woke at night, screaming, clawing their eyes, raving about towers of bone and rivers of writhing flesh under red suns that never set. Some gouged their own throats to silence the visions. Others walked into the forests, never to be seen again. Soon, rumors of his witchcraft reached the ears of forgotten kings. Years passed. Famine gnawed the land. Wolves grew bold, prowling village fringes for the bodies of plague dead piled high as winter wood. He gathered followers among the desperate and mad priests defrocked for heresy, midwives who whispered curses over stillborn infants, ex-soldiers who drank lamp oil to kill the voices in their skulls. They built their temple in silence, stone by stolen stone, deep within the birch forest where sun died beneath tangled boughs. In those guttural syllables, the first seed of the eyeless one's cult took root. That night, as his followers lay prostrate before the black altar, Azelian lifted his hands to the roof beams and spoke softly. The world has forgotten the oldest truth. Blood is the only prayer the gods can hear. The dark philosophy, pure blood, pure darkness. They called it the doctrine of pure darkness. In the damp candlelit vaults beneath the birch forest, Azelian taught his disciples a truth that burned away sanity as flame consumes dry straw. He spoke of purity not as fuel, not as innocence, but as the raw light needed to illuminate darkness absolute. Virgin blood was untouched light. The eyeless one, he explained, fed upon light to weave flesh, for darkness alone is formless, meaningless, lost. But when shaped by light, it becomes sightless power. He told them, "Virginity is a lie priests sell to men, but its blood holds the oldest key." In his cracked voice, he whispered that each human is born with a shard of primal light, a flicker of the first dawn before gods crawled into being. For every virgin slain, its form thickens within the void. And when 1,000 hearts cease as one, each night they gathered to chant the same verse until their voices rasped into silence. It shall walk the waking world and unmake all veils. But first they lost their names, for Azelian stripped each initiate of birth name, key name, even secret name, leaving only a rune cut into their tongues with obsidian. Each warm heart, carved from trembling ribs, was a step closer to their god's open mouth. Their old selves bled into dust upon that cold stone floor. But before then, we shall taste what lies beyond light. His followers knelt upon the dirt floor, faces smeared with ash and goat blood, eyes rolling white with devotion. Azelian moved among them, his bare feet leaving bloody footprints. He recited words from the skin scroll, words that made the torch flames curl inward as if afraid. For every flicker of light devoured, the eyeless one grows sinew and bone. They called themselves the devourers of dawn. Their sigil was a black spiral upon a pale circle, tattooed upon their breastbones with ink mixed from lamp soot and menstrual blood. Darkness without flesh is death without dreaming. Flesh without darkness is dreaming without truth. Only when light is eaten will the eyeless one awaken. It was said that those who memorized the entire scroll's invocations would lose all fear of death, and thus their philosophy deepened into hunger. To them, each sacrifice was a candle snuffed to feed the infinite dark. Each scream was a hymn. For Azelian taught them one final truth, whispered only to his closest disciples. In the end, darkness will devour even darkness. The first blood ritual, feeding the eyeless one. The night of their first true sacrifice came when the moon hung low and swollen. Its light curdled to a sickly yellow by the winter mist. Azelian gathered his disciples within the deepest chamber of their hidden temple, a vaulted hall carved from bedrock, walls slick with damp and streaked black with the soot of years of burning tallow. At its center stood a great altar of rough-hewn granite, pitted and darkened by countless offerings of blood and fat burned in iron bowls. Above the altar rose a twisted stone arch, carved with spiraling glyphs so old that even Azelian admitted he had not learned their full meaning. Her wrists and ankles were bound in braided horsehair, her naked skin mottled blue with cold and bruising fingers. She was laid upon the altar, the stone leaching warmth from her trembling flesh. Fear not, for in your ending lies the world's true beginning. The scream that tore from her mouth rose above the chanting, piercing the gloom like a burning arrow in the night sky. Her blood gushed hot and steaming upon the altar, running down carved channels to fill the shallow basins below. The disciples moaned low and shivered in ecstasy as he intoned, only that they called to darkness like rotting flesh calls to flies. And the chanting faded, the shadows gathered close around them, silent witnesses to a darkness fed and made hungrier still. Azelian reached into her chest cavity with bare, blood-slick hands, wrapping long fingers around her still beating heart. As he severed it from her body, her final breath escaped in a trembling sigh, eyes fixed upon a darkness none could see. Torches were lit, their flames fed with oil, thickened by powdered bone. The smoke rose acrid and choking, filling every lung with a taste of burned marrow. The disciples knelt in a wide circle, naked but for streaks of goat's blood painted in spirals across their pale bellies and breasts. Their eyes rolled white as they chanted words torn from the skin scroll, syllables rasping through raw throats until their voices blended into a single vibrating drone that made the stone floor tremble beneath their knees. At Azelian's command, 2 novices dragged forth the first sacrifice, a girl of perhaps 16 winters, hair black and unbound, eyes wide with terror. Azelian raised his obsidian knife, the blade carved with micro-runes, so small they resembled crawling lice. He pressed its point lightly against her sternum, just enough to draw a bead of bright blood. Leaning close, he whispered into her ear, his cracked lips brushing her earlobe, "Your light will build his bones. Your death will become his breath." With a swift, practiced movement, he drew the blade down, opening her from throat to navel. The novices dipped bone spoons into the pools of blood, raising them to their lips and drinking in silent reverence. He lifted the heart high, the blood dripping onto his face like red rain. First light extinguished, first bone woven, first step taken towards the eyeless dawn. And in the silent horror that followed as the corpse cooled, the prophecy of 1,000 hearts, building the eyeless god as the years unfolded like rotten petals. Azelian's cult grew bolder. Their hidden temple deepened, stone by stolen stone, until the outer halls were forgotten by the world above. In that endless night beneath earth and root, the disciples whispered a single number again, 1,000, tasting its weight upon their tongues like blood upon iron. It was Azelian who first spoke of the prophecy. One night, as smoke from burning fat coiled around his head like a funeral shroud, he unrolled the skin scroll across the altar, slick with old blood. The disciples knelt in silence, their naked bodies trembling in the cold, eyes fixed upon his skeletal hands as he traced the ancient glyphs. For to them, the promise of apocalypse was no doom, but a final liberation from the chains of mortal flesh. In the eyeless one, they saw not a demon nor a god, but the truth of creation's end. The silence after all prayers fail. But for it to rise, to walk among men and drink their dreams raw, it required a body built from purest essence. With fewer, it will crawl upon the world for one night only, blind and raging, before dissolving into rot and ash. But with 1,000, it will reign beyond the death of all suns. 1,000 hearts to weave 1,000 shadows into flesh. He told them this was not metaphor nor riddle. The eyeless one slumbered within the deepest abyss of unlight, a god born before creation split dark from dawn. Virgins were stolen from burned villages, plague orphans taken from monastery steps, girls bought from famine-stricken parents for a handful of mold-black bread. For 1,000 hearts was not merely a number. It was the price of ending all numbers, of tearing the world from the circle of sun and sky, and feeding it at last to the God without eyes who waited, patient as time, beneath the cold black earth. Each virgin heart is a candle snuffed to forge a bone, a sinew, a mouth without eyes. Without 1,000, its flesh cannot hold. Some disciples wept with terror at these words. Others shivered in rapture. The prophecy detailed every aspect. 999 sacrifices prepared under waning moons. The final 1,000th heart offered upon a blood-red dawn. As blood dripped onto the scroll, he whispered, "Each must die willingly or in terror," for both surrender and fear carried light strong enough to weave divine flesh. Azelian carved the number into his chest with a blade of obsidian and bone, pressing so deep that his ribs gleamed wet beneath torn muscle. The 1,000 will feed him, I will guide him, and we will unmake the world together. From that night forth, every breath of the cult was a step upon a darkened path towards this single goal. Each was marked with a rune of unlight upon her brow, each heart numbered, recorded in blooding upon calfskin pages that no flame has yet erased. The eyeless one, the demon born from 1,000 hearts, they called it the eyeless one. In the forgotten tongue of Azelian's scroll, it was Namtar Etu Shahulu, the shadow without sight, the mouth that feeds on dreams. Its true name could not be spoken by human throat without tearing flesh from bone. The scroll described its form in fragmented verses. No eyes to see, for it sees with every fear. No ears to hear, for it hears in every scream. A mouth wide as sorrow, with teeth of shattered bone. It dreamt of consuming all living minds, to end the endless noise of prayers and thoughts. But to rise from its dream, it required flesh woven from mortal light, the light trapped within 1,000 virgin hearts, a tongue that laps blood, a breath that rots hope. Its torso was human-shaped, but eyeless, head smooth and featureless, save for a gaping vertical mouth that stretched from crown to chest, lined with jagged rows of teeth like broken knives. Its arms were long, ending in twisted hands with 7 clawed fingers each. Rise from unlight, walk upon flesh, drink the sight of the living. For the eyeless one fed not upon flesh alone, but upon dreams, prayers, and the memory of light. Where it walked, hope curdled to terror. Fields blighted, children were born eyeless and silent, and no name remained upon any tongue it touched. And from within would crawl the true form of the eyeless one, a being of bone and shadow, its skin slick with clotted blood, its mouth opening wide to swallow human thoughts. For to summon the eyeless one was to end the world, and in that ending their own souls would not ascend, nor be reborn. They would become whispers in its endless mouth, each thought devoured, each dream dissolved, until only darkness remained. Silent, sightless, absolute. Along its shoulders, coiled carvings of writhing worms, symbols of decay and silent rebirth. Azalian taught that the eyeless one was born from darkness itself when uncreation was torn apart to birth light. Trapped in abyssal slumber, in the temple's deepest vault lay its effigy, a monstrous figure carved from black basalt, veined with crimson quartz. During rite, the disciples anointed the statue with blood mixed with powdered onyx and goat fat, chanting, Etusho Halu Beo Namtar. They believed that when the 1,000th heart was sacrificed, the basalt would crack the effigy, splitting as a rotten fruit. Some claimed it had no true body, that what emerged would be only a shadow with a voice like cracking ice, dissolving minds with a single word. Others believed it would take Azalian as its vessel, wearing his flayed flesh as a mask to walk among men and speak doom. But all agreed on one thing. Its hunger was infinite. In secret, even among the cult's most faithful, some trembled at the thought. The final night, sacrificing the 1,000th virgin. The night of the 1,000th sacrifice arrived beneath a moon swollen red with frost and distant storms. In the frozen forest above, no wolves howled, no wind stirred. Even the birch trees seemed to hold their ragged breaths, as if the world itself recoiled from what was about to be birthed. Within the temple's heart, torches flickered low, fed with fat mixed from the brains of the last 999 victims. Her wrists were bound in braided horsehair, soaked in goat's blood. Her ankles, raw and scabbed, dragged limply across the stone as two novices lifted her onto the altar. Azelian bent over her, his voice cracking with the force of words never meant for human throat. Their smoke curled along the ceiling in black coils, tracing spirals that mirrored the glyphs carved deep into the stone walls, streams running down his ribs and thighs to pool at his feet. For the briefest instant, something passed between them, not mercy nor hatred, but an understanding older than life itself, that all flesh is food, and all dreams end in a mouth of darkness. In his right hand he held the obsidian blade, in his left a bowl carved from the skull of his first sacrifice, filled with clotted blood, black as midnight oil. The chanting built to a scream, voices breaking, throats tearing. He raised the heart high, its surface slick with pulsing life, and shouted. The floor was slick with frozen blood, and upon it knelt the disciples, naked, shivering, eyes wide with rapture and terror. At the altar stood Azelian. His robes were gone, leaving his scar-carved flesh bare, each rune cut fresh and bleeding. The torches guttered, flickered, and burned with sickly green fire as the first groan echoed up from the abyss below. A sound like bones grinding in a giant's throat. They brought forth the final girl. She was no older than 14, her flaxen hair matted with tears and blood from the long journey in chains. Warm blood burst forth, steaming in the icy chamber air, splattering Asilian's face and chest. He dropped the knife, plunging his hands into her chest cavity, fingers wrapping around her heart, still trembling with life. She did not scream. Her eyes, pale green as moss beneath snow, stared past Azelian into a darkness no mortal could bear. Perhaps she saw what waited. Perhaps she saw nothing at all. The chanting rose, low and thunderous, shaking the very walls of the vault. Et Hughes, Halu, Baal Namtar. 1,000 hearts for 1,000 shadows. Weave flesh for the eyeless one. Let unlight take shape upon this earth. The blade flashed in torchlight. A single, swift cut from sternum to navel. She gasped once, a wet, rattling sound, and her gaze flickered to his face. Azelian tore the heart free. Blood sprayed across the altar, striking the nearest disciples who moaned in ecstasy. 1,000 hearts given, 1,000 shadows woven. Rise, nameless God, and feed. The ground trembled beneath their knees. From the deepest fissures of the temple, a wind rose, reeking of rotten milk and blood turned to black slime. And in that instant, every disciple wept tears of blood, knowing their God had awakened. The holy massacre when church knights faced the eyeless god. But even as the eyeless one began to stir, there came the sound of iron upon stone, boots in marching rhythm, shields slamming against mailed fists. The tunnels shook as the Teutonic knights descended into the temple. Black crosses painted upon white surcoats, helms veiled in chainmail shadows. In his left hand he bore a lantern of blessed oil that burned with a pale blue flame. In his right, a mace carved with runes of exorcism, its head forged from meteorite iron. Behind him marched 12 knights, silent as statues, each carrying a long sword anointed with sacred myrrh and salt. Where its light touched, the glyphs along the walls smoked and hissed, some melting into rivulets of black slime that ran down the stone like tears. Leading them was Father Hildebrand, a priest inquisitor of the Vatican, clad in robes lined with riveted steel, a silver crucifix heavy upon his chest. They entered the devourer's vault as the cult wailed in ecstasy before their waking God. He rises even now to drink your God's dying light. Cracks split the basalt effigy of the eyeless one from within. A deep groaning rose, a sound like earth tearing open to swallow the sky. Foul wind blasted outwards, snuffing torches, filling lungs with the stench of rotting grave flesh. But Father Hildebrand strode through the cloud, lantern held aloft. As the remaining cultists screamed and clawed at their feet, the Teutonic knights began the sealing rite, hammering shut the temple's mouth with curses, prayers, and liquid metal glowing with hellish light. The priest raised his mace and struck Azilian's chest, caving bone and rune alike. The heart fell from Azilian's hand, bouncing wetly upon the blood-slick altar. For a heartbeat, both sides stood frozen. Then Azilian turned, heart still clutched in his blood-soaked fist, and smiled. His teeth were black with clotted blood. His eyes gleamed with a fever beyond madness. "Too late, priest," he rasped, voice trembling with triumph. Father Hildebrand raised his lantern high. Its pale blue glow washed across the vault, searing into the shadows. The knights moved with brutal grace, cutting down naked cultists as if harvesting grain. Limbs fell upon cold stone. Skulls split open with dull, cracking thuds. The chanting of the cult turned to shrieks of agony and gurgling prayers to a God who would not save them. In Nomen Patris et Spiritus Sancti, he intoned, and the knights advanced. The first disciple lunged forward with an obsidian dagger. A sword met his throat mid-step, severing his scream in a spray of bright blood. Azilian screamed curses in the old tongue, casting handfuls of powdered bone into the air. Glyphs swirling around him like black hornets. As the old sorcerer gasped and sank to his knees, the vault itself began to tremble. Father Hildebrand turned to his knights, voice ragged but unyielding. Seal the vault with lead. Pray that God's silence is stronger than his mercy this night. The knights fell back in formation, dragging chains of forged iron behind them. Unrolling sheets of molten lead carried in blessed bronze vats. Behind them, from within the fissured effigy, came a final sound, the slow, sucking gasp of a mouth that would never feed. The final seal, the eyeless one's curse upon mankind, as the last sheets of molten lead hissed and cooled against stone. Sealing the temple's vast mouth forever, a silence fell upon the vault. It was not the silence of prayer, nor of peace. It was a silence so heavy it pressed into the marrow, vibrating with an absence deeper than death. The Teutonic Knight and Father Hildebrand stood frozen, breaths trembling in the oily torchlight, ears ringing with the echoes of slaughter and screams. Then it came. A voice rose from within the fractured effigy of the eyeless one, not spoken by lips nor shaped by tongue, but a vibration that shivered up through blood and bone, reverberating behind the eyes like cold iron scraping upon wet stone. Your lead cannot hold me, your prayers cannot bind me. My flesh is shadows, my bones are dreams. The besought statue split further, its mouth widening into a ragged crevasse lined with jagged stone teeth, slick with black ichor. His lips split into a grin wet with blood and foam. Though its eyeless face turned to no man, all felt its gaze upon them, drilling through flesh into the secret places hidden even from their own prayers. Azelian, broken upon the floor, raised his head with a final, rattling breath. Maps were burned, knights sworn to silence under threat of excommunication and death. But in every monastery and fortress chapel where those knights knelt to pray, they trembled at a memory no psalm could wash away. But deep beneath the roots of frozen birch and moss-choked stone, in that lead-sealed vault of shadows, something still waits, listening with no ears, watching with no eyes, dreaming of a feast that will never end. My God, speak your final blessing. The voice sank deeper into their minds, every word thrumming with rot. For my hunger is patient, and my name is never spoken without fear. Your sons will dream of me. Your daughters will feed me. Your world will become my mouth. 1,000 hearts for 1,000 years, and in the 1,000th year I shall rise again. Then the vault shuddered. The basalt mouth cracked one final time before slamming shut, spraying black ichor across the altar and the corpses piled at its base. Azelian fell forward, dead, before his brow struck the stone, his lifeless eyes still alight with ecstasy. The night dragged him away as the lead seals cooled and hardened, locking the eyeless one within its temple prison. Father Hildebrand whispered a final prayer, words quivering as tears slid down his soot-streaked face. Outside, dawn rose pale and silent. The birch trees stood ghostly white against the bloody sky, their branches trembling with wind, carrying the scent of molten metal and charred flesh. The Vatican declared the temple cursed and buried its existence within forbidden archives, for they knew what the eyeless one had promised. Not if, but when. And so the world turned, year upon year, century upon century. I stand here now, at the edge of the forgotten clearing, beneath a moon, so thin it could be a silver blade held to the throat of night. Before me rises what remains of the temple's entrance, the sea, scarred by centuries of rain, lichen, and silent dread. Snow drifts down, settling upon the rune-carved surface, filling each groove with pale shadow. They say no one comes here anymore, that wolves skirt this place in silence, and the birch trees lean away as if fearing what still sleeps below. But tonight I had to see it with my own eyes. The runes burn cold against my palm, and for an instant I imagine I feel something stir beneath, like a great beast shifting in restless sleep. I close my eyes, listening past the sighing wind and cracking ice, past the tremble of branches and distant owl cries, faint as moth wings brushing parchment. A voice not spoken into the ear, but curled directly into the mind, ancient, cracked, and dripping with hunger, to touch the stone where 1,000 hearts beat their last, where a god without eyes dreamed of the final darkness. I place my gloved hand upon the frozen granite, and then I hear it. Drink my darkness, and you shall see all things that tremble in the blind spaces behind creation. For a moment, the snow swirls into a shape, tall, faceless, mouth gaping wide in a scream that swallows all sound. I blink, and it is gone, leaving only moonlight and falling snow. A whisper. My breath comes in ragged plumes, clouding the moonlight with fear. But the whisper continues, curling into every shadow of my thoughts. 1,000 hearts, 1,000 years. The seals crack, stone decays, and silence will end. I gasp, stumbling back from the door. Eat them and become me. Feed me, and I shall open your mind like an egg. The wind rises, rattling dead birch branches like bone chimes. I turn away, heart thundering, steps crunching through frozen drifts. Behind me, the sea looms silent, its runes glowing faintly with reflected moonlight or something far older. I do not look back again. But even now, as I walk away through the skeletal birch forest, the whisper coils through my mind like a worm through rot. 1,000 years almost past, I will rise, and you will feed me first. Thank you for walking with me tonight into the shadows of forgotten blood and whispered gods. If this story has chilled your bones and left echoes in your thoughts, then its purpose is fulfilled. There are countless other dark truths buried beneath centuries of silence, cults, curses, forbidden rituals, all waiting to be unearthed under the pale moonlight of curiosity. If you wish to continue this journey with me into the places where history fears to tread, please like this video so these tales can reach others who listen in the dark. And subscribe to this channel to never miss the next chapter in the blackened scroll of humanity's secret past. Your support ensures that these stories and the voices within them remain alive. Until we meet again beneath another silent sky, sleep lightly, for some whispers never truly fade.